Thank you very much for the presentations. I wanted to ask you, Ms. Posthumus, um, are you very happy to talk about post-human readily? I mean, we already killed humans and now we're dealing with post-humans.
Yeah, I have been reflecting on the problem of affect when you talk about posthumanism. I think on the one hand, what happens is that there's this immense fear, right? The Frankenstein monster that's referred to in the magazine Littéraire, right, is taking over and not being able to imagine a relationship to machines that's something else than domination, right? So we model them on us as much as possible, and then they become like us and they take over, right? So I want to get away from that kind of affect. I'm looking kind of what texts do we have available in which you have machines teaching humans about love, friendship, and I was just reading a recent issue of Wired that was talking about how on the one hand, I mean, there's a huge problem with sex robots, right? That they're very much in the form of females and a certain kind of female body, and that if we thought outside of kind of that heteronormative framework a little bit, this might actually be an opportunity to just kind of explode sexuality instead of thinking about a long, very kind of, well, they're going to be exactly, I mean, that the same biases, right, that we have, or the same kinds of patriarchal structures, they just get reproduced in kind of the machines that we have. So I'm trying to respond with kind of multiple, because I don't think it's as simple as kind of, do I feel happy about it, or if I don't feel happy about it. I think I'm trying to process, right, what I feel at times very powerless about, right? And I think when the examples I get from science fiction actually do cultivate a sense of possibility and potential that moves us outside of this model of the machine's going to kill us one day, or it's just going to wipe us off the planet.
I don't mean to point in that direction that they're going to take over. I mean, just in terms of who are we going to be engaging with. So instead of engaging with the natural world, we've already said, okay, the natural world is not perfect. We want something perfect to engage with. So let's make the machines so that we have something more perfect.
Yeah, maybe I
that's the
should
danger.
have been clear that I see an important difference between transhumanism, which I think is what you're describing, right? This idea that through essentially eliminating our bodies, right, and just downloading our consciousness into it. This is Ray Kurzweil, right? This is transhumanist kind of, again, elevation of a thinking and an interaction with the world that posthumanism challenges. I mean, Rosie Braidotti talks a lot about how we need to be embodied posthumans, and we will be. And I think my other point is that if we come back to Michel Serres thinking about Darwinism, like we're constantly downloading, or we're creating so tools and instruments so that our body can be liberated to do other things, right? So he talks about how inventing the hammer freed the hand to do other things, right? He talks about inventing the act of writing to also download kind of memory in the mind, which frees up the possibility for a kind of invention. So I would also want to maybe problematize just the idea of like this perfection that we're moving to, and that kind of is this future moment. Whereas I think that, as Dominique Lecourt says, right, the technique and la vie are always intertwined, right? And it's the kind of critical thinking aspect that we develop. But I'd like to actually open the table for other questions.
Here is Hannah. Did you want to ask a question? No.
I have a question for Anne. Anne, as I was listening to your fascinating communication, I was thinking about two works actually, and was wondering whether they would fit into your corpus. The first one is the Urlauten Sonata by Kurt Schwitters, in which it's a kind of onomatopoeic mechanism. And if you hear Schwitters perform or his song, he transforms himself into a bird. So that's the first example I have. And the second is the Discours aux animaux de Novarina, in which Novarina has this beautiful transformation of the word, and he says anaimo. So,
Another question?
I will add my purpose, of course, on the Novarina. I'm not specialized in theater, but of course I work with it. And what is wonderful in theater when it's when you put a true animal on the stage, human actors are completely forgotten, upside down. And just a dog doing nothing. Everybody looks at the dog, and it's very interesting to see this. But with Novarina, it's something more interesting because, of course, what is in question is the power of language and of voice. Yeah.
I was also thinking about the researchers of French historian Éric Baratet, who wrote the Point de vue animal, and he tried to write not as an animal, but he tried to find literary structures and forms to get a proper sense of the life of a bull or a life of a chimp. And I was curious to know what you're thinking about these experiences in the domain of history. So it's not novel, but it's history, and especially in French history, there are many historians who are trying to write history from the animal perspective.
Yeah, and Baratet tried to write animals' biography.
Yes,
it's in. He tries to
yes.
put himself in the bodies or in the affects of real animals,
yeah,
like the giraffe or the elephant. In the 19th century, we went through France, and it is interesting, but Baratet stay at the step of thematic, you know. It's normal. It is he is an historian, and so he doesn't work on language. He doesn't try to reach animals by deconstruct our neuroelectrical linguistic structure in our brain. And I think that writers, perhaps that novelists or poets and dramaturgs and so on, they invent life of animals often, but they go further because they want to deconstruct our typically human ways of considering the world. And Pastoureau, of course, it's very interesting what Pastoureau does, because he made a lot of time. It took a lot of time for him to legitimize animal question in history, but now it's quite normal to have this question in history. But at the beginning, it was not an evidence for him when he began to work on heraldic, so on emblem, allegories, symbols, and after he wrote the pig and the bear.
Yes, first of all, I wanted to thank you very much, the three of you, for beautifully weaving together all the themes of our conference in a beautiful last panel. And we had animals, plant, and machines, and post-nature in the same, so well done. I had a question for Anne, maybe, but actually it can be open to the three of you. I like very much the way you showed how literature really has a special power to invoke, I mean, the linguistic power to have those non-humans rising in a new way. And I was wondering to what extent in your corpus for contemporary literature you find links to what Baptiste mentioned earlier, the temps du mythe. In what way this powerful ways to invoke other beings can help us to grasp that? I mean, do you have examples of the return of the myth in contemporary literature?
I have example for the return of tales. I think to Marie-Darius Seg, I think to Pierrette Fleutiot, to myth.
Or more broadly, hybrids, new other kinds of beings from other times.
Des êtres d'un autre temps. Perhaps I don't understand exactly your question. Just
peut-être en français simplement, mais c'est je me demandais dans quelle mesure en fait le pouvoir de la littérature rejoint ce que la philosophie contemporaine tente d'approcher. Dans quelle mesure c'était une tentative pour réunir un petit peu toutes les voix qu'on a eues. Voilà, j'ai l'impression qu'il y a un pouvoir de l'écriture qu'on entend aussi dans la philosophie contemporaine, une recherche littéraire qui retrouve en quelque sorte les pouvoirs du roman.
Les pouvoirs du roman. Ouais. Je suis un peu, voilà, je reste un peu sèche sur cette question parce que peut-être que je comprends pas exactement ce que tu es en train de me demander. I don't understand exactly where you want me to go. And
maybe the form of science fiction. I was thinking about Vincent Message, Des Fêtes des Maîtres et des Possesseurs, as a kind of fiction that is turning the human being as a cattle and being raised by. I don't know who the main character
is a good example of beings which are not completely humans, not completely animal.
It's half and half. It's very hybrid.
Yeah. I read it in contemporary literature. There is a lot. I mean, a lot of writers write about hybridity, but it was not really your question.
Il n'y a pas un sens mythique en fait qui ressort. C'était juste pour essayer de faire le
mythique. No, I don't see this. No. Yeah, because the myth is unhistorical, and I think that contemporary writers are engaged in history, and so I'm not sure that the mythical paradigm is okay in the sense of the Greek myth, or the religious Western myth.
Okay, sorry. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful panel, and I just wanted to ask. I guess inspired by the invasive Benedict's invocation of the invasive plant that smells like cat urine and so on. I was thinking about coming back to Baptiste earlier talking about solastalgia and trying to figure out what are the structures of feeling that would speak to this crisis. And I don't like solastalgia because of the way it rhymes with nostalgia and the kind of distance that it suggests. But I was thinking about disgust and wondering about the uses, the politics, the particularly like affirmative possibilities of a certain kind of disgust or reformulated disgust. If you have anything to say, or any of you have anything to say about that.
Yeah, disgust is thank you, is a very interesting topic and it's perfect for the weeds and brutals and it's the contrary of the aesthetic qualities that you usually give to nature and or stick to nature usually with flowers. So disgust is a very good starting point for these artists. They are doing very humble and sometimes very poor and unesthetic artworks. So I think it reflects. It doesn't. These artists doesn't try to ennoble the nature, and I think they try to keep just this level of disgust and uninteresting nature, and that's what I think is very stimulating. And it's solastalgia is of course an concept under development, still under development. But I like the fact that it's coming from psychiatry, and it's about a feeling and interpretation and subjectivity. And I think it's very subjective about these rituals. They're highly subjective matter. So disgust is totally subjective for different cultures. These rituals are literally treasures because they have some virtues, medicinal virtues. So it's a very moving notion, and I like it. Thank you.
So I was just going to respond to this question of where the mythic might be right now. We haven't talked very much about literature that comes from Africa in French or literature that comes from the Caribbean in French. And I think that one can find that kind of mythic structure still, and a form of animism, right? Because there's still a thought of animism that exists in a lot of those cultures.
If you speak about animism, you will find it, for example, in Céline Minard, Feuilles et Flingués, in Marie Darrieussecq, of course, works.
What about Stéphane Auduguy?
Stéphane Auduguy, perhaps.
Some.
I'm not sure, because with l'histoire du roi du lion, là. I don't know if it is animistic.
But there, I wonder if we want to talk a bit about the aesthetic of magical realism and how that brings back.
Yeah.
Right?
In this sense, yes. But in fact, I don't understand how you use the term of myth. Is it like Baptiste this afternoon, animism? But animism doesn't mean a lot of things. I mean, there are a lot of different animism, and we have often a Western look on animism. Often Western stereotypical look.
I just don't want to take the mic to Judy, but just to make things more precise, because I just rediscussed that with Baptiste. The question is not the time of myth, which means going back to antiquity, but really how literature nowadays take those new beings, the fact that there are more and more hybridity in the species. So it's more interspecific. It's more the idea of the arrival of new beings on in our world.
I'm interested. I'm going to close this discussion down at this point because we have reached the end of our time. But I would just like to comment that it's remarkable that Frédéric's last words there echo the prologue to Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is the text that we started with, which is exactly about the production of new bodies and new forms. Exactly. So thank you very much for this glimpse into the future after the long look back at the past that we've had over the course of these few days. Thank you very much to everybody, and let's all go over the road and enjoy a drink together.